With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories: St. Kitts and Nevis moves closer to establishing National Architects Registration Board. St. Kitts and Nevis continues to accelerate 25 by 25 food sovereignty agenda. Public consultations begin in St. Lucia on cannabis industrial bill. Concerns mount in Antigua and Barbuda about sexual harassment in the workplace. Internationally, Hamas says no Gaza ceasefire talks unless Israel releases prisoners. Now, the details. The Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis has taken significant strides toward formalizing its architectural sector through collaborative efforts between the government and professional bodies. The Honourable Dr. Joel Clark, Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, recently disclosed progress on establishing a National Architects Registration Board during a high-level meeting with the St. Kitts Nevis Institute of Architects, SKNIA. An amendment to the Architects Registration Act, which underwent its parliamentary reading in early 2024, aims to legitimize local architectural practices, enforce sustainable infrastructure standards, and protect consumer and practitioner rights. Minister Clark emphasized the government's commitment to structured consultations, stating, quote, "Any effort we undertake is made with full consideration for all those affected," end quote. Key stakeholders, including the Department of Physical Planning and the Development Control and Planning Board, are collaborating with the SKNIA to refine the board's operational framework. This partnership underscores the administration's focus on integrating technical expertise into policy making. During the meeting, Dexter Fazell, current president of the SKNIA, spearheaded the institute's delegation, signaling the organization's proactive role in shaping the regulatory landscape. Fazell, who previously served as vice president under the 2023-2025 Executive Committee, now leads an ambitious agenda focused on professional standardization and institutional reform. The proposed board will focus on licensing and compliance, consumer protection, and professional development. Despite the passage of the Architects Registration Act in 2021, delays in constituting the board persisted due to administrative bottlenecks. Minister Clark's intervention marks a tangible shift toward implementation, aligning with recent amendments to the Act that mandates ministerial consultation with the SKNIA before board appointments. With the draft legislation advancing through Parliament, the SKNIA and government agencies are prioritizing the following: public consultations, operationalizing the board, and regional alignment. Minister Clark emphasized, quote, "This is a major positive step toward legitimizing our local architectural practices, highlighting the initiative's potential to redefine infrastructure development in the Federation." As legislative processes accelerate, stakeholders remain cautiously optimistic about achieving full implementation by late 2025.
As the Caribbean region advances its 25 by 25 agenda to achieve food security and reduce dependency on imports, global economic challenges continue to affect households and businesses alike. Since the onset of the pandemic, St. Kitts and Nevis, like much of the rest of the region, has faced a soaring food import bill. In some cases, supermarket shelves have been left bare. Given the Federation's heavy reliance on imported goods, inflationary pressures from international markets have directly impacted local prices.
2024 would have seen major impact in the region as food prices for cereals, meat, dairy, vegetable oil, and raw sugar increased significantly on the global market. Of course, we import those increases, we import those inflation, and we have to manage within that context. However, 2025 is adding a lot of worry to the situation. The increased climate-related challenges, increased transportation and logistics costs, uncertainty in tariffs and rules, trade rules, would have a significant impact on the costs of food globally and here within our region.
According to the International Monetary Fund, inflation in St. Kitts and Nevis stood at 2.4% in 2024, a significant decrease from the 10.7% in 2022. While this represents some relief, concerns remain about the long-term stability of prices and the region's economic resilience. Then Dr. Irfan Ali recently addressed food security and inflation challenges in the region, highlighting concerns over rising egg prices.
Just to give you an example, bird flu as we know it was first reported around March 2022. As I speak to you now, current situation as a result of bird flu is alarming. There's a 20% decline in egg production from the US, and you would know that we source most of our hatching eggs out of the US. We source table eggs also. Many of the countries source table eggs out of the US. For a matter of fact, in some regions, when you look at the year-on-year increase in the cost of eggs since the first reported case of bird flu, it is 70% increase. When you look at egg prices as of January this year in the US, there's a 15% increase in the prices of eggs. When you look at poultry meat, there is a 11% decline in production as I speak to you in the US. And as you know, the US occupy about close to 30% of global market share in terms of poultry meat.
As the CARICOM lead on food and agriculture, he also provided updates on the progress of the 25 by 25 initiative.
We are discussing the impact of these challenges for the region, and important for us is to look at the full supply chain, to look at alternative supply routes, and to look at ways in which we can enhance and integrate our capacity and capability to withstand what could be a major shock in the global market. We have made significant progress. If you look at from 2022 to the end of October, November 2024, we would have had about a 24% increase in food production across the region. We would have had major investments in infrastructure to support food production, whether it's cold storage, farm to market access road, solar drying facility, loan approvals, establishment of dairy facilities. We have seen significant increase.
In St. Kitts and Nevis, efforts continue towards achieving the goal of reducing the nation's 200 million food import bill. The government has been implementing measures to strengthen local agriculture production and enhance food stability.
What we did more so was not just look at it through that lens, but look at it through an economic empowerment lens. And our vision was, how can we put 25% of that money into the hands and the pockets of local farmers? How can we ensure that our local farmers were making 25% of $200 million approximately?
Samal Duggins, Minister of Agriculture.
In continued strides toward reducing its $198 million food import bill, St. Kitts and Nevis, through many initiatives, continues to bolster the agriculture and fisheries industries. Agriculture Minister, the Honorable Samal Duggins, spoke of one of the initiatives during an interview with I'm Making It Happen, highlighting its potential to carve an export niche for local farmers.
We planted the first set of seeds for that project, and we are looking forward to yielding the fruits of that project and being able to set up a steady and secured export market for hot peppers to the Dipasca company going forward. So yes, as we call it, that's the hot topic right now.
The project, part of the Federation's emergency plan to meet CARICOM's 25 by 2025 target, aims to offset $50 million in annual imports by prioritizing 15 key crops, including tomatoes, onions, and pineapples. The urgency stems from St. Kitts and Nevis joining the regional initiative 2 years late in 2022, compelling a rapid mobilization. Over 115,000 pineapple slips, drip irrigation systems, and climate-resilient farming training have been distributed to 500-plus farmers.
Part of all of that wasn't just the practical side, it was the back-end training as well. So for every crop that we identified, we did a whole session of training along the entire value chain. So from land preparation, what's the best process? What type of seeds do you grow what time of year? Based on drought resilient, heat tolerance, what varieties do you select when? What's the best practice for production? Pest management, disease management, how best to harvest, post-harvest management, agro-processing, sales and marketing.
Okay.
We went all the way through the entire value chain and did training with all the farmers because they were all invited. So who came, we were able to impart that knowledge. But also we did that for every single identified crop. And farmers were able to sign up for their crop of choice. So some farmers signed up and said, I prefer growing tomatoes, I prefer growing melons, I prefer growing bananas. And for every identified crop, we trained the farmers of interest.
There has also been a $15 million revenue spike in fisheries, a sector record.
Imagine empowering that family to earn their portion of that $50 million. And we're seeing a great deal of success. It was our fishing sector last year earned the highest revenue ever in the history of St. Kitts and Nevis, $15 million. So somewhere within St. Kitts and Nevis, our fisher folk walked away with $15 million last year.
With 2025 as the finish line, the ministry is betting on transforming agriculture's stigma as menial labor into a wealth-building enterprise.
What does it look like empowering our local farming community to earn $50 million? You understand that economic development. Yes. And then when we look at it even deeper, who are traditionally our farmers? It is that family from the rural community that traditionally, if you look at the optics, that grew up in a wooden house and somewhere within what we would call the bush because they're surrounded by agriculture.
Agriculture Minister, the Honorable Samuel Duggins.
Gangs have infiltrated nearly every facet of life across the Caribbean, and regional leaders now believe it is time to take decisive action to ensure public safety. Crime and violence remain pressing issues across the region, prompting extensive discussions at the recently concluded 48th Regional Heads of Government meeting in Bridgetown.
We see gangs as an existential threat. Obviously, the ultimate case would be with the situation in Haiti. But we also see gangs acting in ways and committing acts that can only be described as acts of terror. And therefore, I have called in Jamaica, and I'm making the call now at this CARICOM platform, that there needs to be a global war on gangs in the same way that there is a global war on terror. If the gangs are allowed free rein, they will challenge the effectiveness and undermine states, which we are seeing happening not just in the region in CARICOM, but in the wider Central and South American region.
Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness was among leaders addressing the issue, emphasizing the urgent need for stronger interventions.
I believe there is general consensus that in addition to treating with the security issue from a public health perspective, and treating with the root causes of social disenfranchisement and economic marginalization, that there needs to be a firm hand in treating with the gangs, particularly as it relates to the transnational element of the gangs, which means that the countries in the region would have to have greater cooperation and sharing of intelligence and resources in tackling this very grave threat.
In recent years, St. Kitts and Nevis has witnessed a surge in crime and violence, much of it linked to gang-related activities. Researchers, while conducting a 90-day campaign, identified several active gangs in St. Kitts, with a significant portion of murders attributed to their actions. Regional leaders have taken a firm stance on violent crime, focusing on legislative measures, the public health impact, and law enforcement strategies to curb the growing problem.
We agree that the changing nature of crime is such that actions of acts of violence in the public space, in certain instances, must now be regarded as acts of terrorism. We're talking here about indiscriminate shooting in a public place where the perpetrators endanger all and sundry. In order to address that, we believe that the legislation needs to be cognizant of what exactly we are experiencing now as against what the existing legislation anticipated. And to that end, the heads sourced and obtained the services of a former AG of Belize, Godfrey Smith, who has been tasked to review our legislative templates and to come up with new legislative proposals for consideration by the heads for changes to be made on the legislative side to treat with what we are experiencing as against what we are surprised by.
Firearms continue to be a critical concern, posing as an existential threat to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider Caribbean. Statistics reveal that over 81% of homicides in the Federation involve the use of a firearm, underscoring the urgent need for action.
We also expect that these acts, using the tools of trade of the criminals at large in our communities, from Bahamas to Suriname, St. Lucia to Trinidad and Tobago, that they be deemed to be acts of terrorism and allow us to view them not only by the executive, but by our judiciary, and allow us to fashion the appropriate legislation to deal with that. So we adopted the working definition of crime and violence as a public health issue, since the effect on human conditions are such that violent crime, largely carried out by firearms, 80% of which of the killings that we're experiencing are done by firearms, and 90% of those firearms are coming to us from one particular source. So we agree that this is a public health issue, and of course, we will continue to engage it as such.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley.
In regional news, public consultations begin in St. Lucia on Cannabis Industrial Bill, DBS St. Lucia reports.
Speaking on the upcoming consultations, CEO of the RSA, Dylan Norbert Inglis, explained that the bill has already been circulated for public review and shared with key stakeholders. The consultations will allow communities across the island, including Castries, to engage directly with officials, ask questions and voice concerns.
We are hoping to have some community engagements throughout the island in Soufriere, Benery, Grosselet, Fufort, Barbano, Ancillary and Castries over the next 2 weeks. That will facilitate getting into these communities and ensuring that these people, one, are informed about the bill and what the bill entails, and also have an opportunity to give their feedback, their comments, their concerns.
Following the consultations, the RSA plans to conduct further stakeholder engagement to refine the bill. The feedback collected will help determine what amendments, if any, need to be made before it is finalized and submitted to Cabinet for review.
Gotten the comments from these stakeholders and from the public, we will seek to determine what comments and concerns we can incorporate in the bill, inform the AG's chambers of the required changes, and have a finalized version of the bill submitted to Cabinet for onward processing at Parliament.
While there is no fixed timeline for completion, Norbert Inglis says the pace of progress will depend on the volume and complexity of the feedback received. If major revisions are needed, the process may take longer, but if the public is largely in agreement with the current draft, the bill could move forward quickly. Consultations will be held in Soufriere on Wednesday, February 26th, Dennery on Thursday, February 27th, Grosselet on Tuesday, March 4th, Vieux-Fort on Wednesday, March 5th, Barbano on Thursday, March 6th, Ancillary on Tuesday, March 11th, and Castries on Wednesday, March 12th. The public consultations mark a significant step in shaping the future of St. Lucia's cannabis industry. Citizens are encouraged to participate and make their voices heard as the country moves closer to finalizing its cannabis legislation. For the DBS News World, Manasseh Stanislas reporting.
Concerns mount in Antigua and Barbuda about sexual harassment in the workplace. ABS Antigua has the details.
The workplace should be a safe space, but for too many employees, it's a place of fear and intimidation. Advocacy group Women Against Rape says reports of sexual harassment and gender-based violence are climbing.
There was an uptick in 2024. I can speak from the reports that Women Against Rape received, and yes, there was definitely an increase. I would say about between 2 to 5% of sexual violence, especially in the workplace.
The Integra Trades and Labour Union confirms the trend, with more workers filing complaints over inappropriate and unwanted behavior.
On behalf of the workplaces, I would have to agree with Nurse Wong. There definitely was an increase in 2024. We saw a few more issues, grievance matters that dealt with sexual harassment. So I will definitely agree with her that there was an increase in 2024 than the years gone by.
Advocates say the effects of sexual harassment go beyond discomfort. Victims often experience emotional strain, causing many to take days off from work, which in turn leads to financial difficulties.
Because there is this feeling, as was expressed by some of the persons who were violated, there's this feeling that, well, everybody knows what has happened to me. So that in a great sense, kind of cripples the person's level of performance.
With more victims stepping forward, advocates say stronger laws are needed. A national sexual harassment bill is in the works, with public awareness campaigns already on the way. As the country gears up for the 2025 Stop Gender-Based Violence Walk, organizers hope to keep the conversation going and push for real change in workplaces nationwide. The event is set for March 8, beginning 2 p.m. at the Botanical Gardens. Advocates say participation is key to ensuring safer workplaces for everyone. Jamie Roche, ABS News.
We now bring you these international reports.
The UN Secretary-General has condemned Israel's military operations in the occupied West Bank. Israel expelled residents from 3 refugee camps over the weekend. The military says it will have a prolonged presence in those areas over the next year. Meanwhile, talks for the next phase of the ceasefire in Gaza have stalled. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delayed the release of Palestinian prisoners, demanding an end to Hamas's public handover ceremonies. Palestinian families have been pictured waiting for their loved ones. Hamas says the delay puts the ceasefire in grave danger, while Mr. Netanyahu said he's ready to resume the war at any moment. Saeed Shahata from BBC Arabic updated us on the situation in the West Bank.
The Israeli army is expanding its operation all over the occupied West Bank. And the Israeli defense minister said the Israeli army had evacuated 3 camps, Nur Shams, Tulkarm, Jenin, and 40,000 Palestinians have evacuated those camps. And the army had been ordered to stay there for next year. So the reason there is condemnation for that from the UN Secretary General and also from the spokesperson of the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Mr. Nabil Abu Ordina, who said this will lead to escalation, will lead to instability, so it should be stopped because Israel deployed, decision to deploy tanks in the northern West Bank is the first time for 2 decades. So it is concerning. The forces go to other places in the West Bank because West Bank is divided in areas and settlement in between and checkpoints. So it is inhuman situation, especially there is some damages for sanitation facilities and water facilities for tens of thousands of people in West Bank, and they don't know where to go. And it is ringing alarm. Is Gaza, then West Bank, so where else? So there is a problem for, and also there is 51 were killed since the operation in those camps in 21st of January, so more than a month ago, especially in Jenin and Tulkarm.
Russia has welcomed what it described as a much more balanced US stance on Ukraine. That's after the United Nations Security Council adopted a US-drafted resolution on Monday that took a neutral position on the conflict. The US also unsuccessfully opposed a resolution demanding Russia's withdrawal from Ukraine.
A path to peace is possible.
The vote have exposed divisions between the US and allies such as Britain and France, both of which abstained on the Security Council resolution. And they also highlighted a dramatic shift in Washington's position since President Donald Trump took office. That's been further underscored by the possibility of a collaboration between the US and Russia on rare earth minerals. Rare earth are a group of 17 metals that are crucial in the production of electric vehicles, cell phones, missile systems, and other electronics. On Monday, Vladimir Putin said Russia was open to joint projects with American partners. And on Tuesday, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that, quote, "The Americans need rare earth metals. We have a lot of them." Both Putin and Trump have expressed an interest in a potential US-Russia economic deal, but Peskov said significant work is still needed to normalize relations. One area of disagreement appears to be on the issue of European peacekeepers in Ukraine as part of any deal to end the war. As he met with French President Emmanuel Macron on Monday, Trump said Putin was on board with the idea.
Yeah, he will accept that. He will accept. I've asked him that question.
On Tuesday, Peskov referred reporters back to an earlier statement by Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Last week, he said Moscow views European peacekeepers in Ukraine as a, quote, direct threat to Russia's sovereignty.
For small open economies like
South Africa's central bank governor has said rising risks from global trade tensions, as well as a potential local VAT hike, could derail a 2-year disinflation process in Africa's most industrialised economy. Lesetja Kanyago spoke to Reuters on Tuesday on the sidelines of a meeting of G20 finance officials in Cape Town.
One thing that is looming large had been the uncertainty, the elevated uncertainty that had been created by some of the trade measures that are taken by some of the major economies. When you impose tariffs, you expect that the other countries will respond.
South Africa's G20 presidency has been overshadowed by the prospect of a global trade war since US President Donald Trump returned to the White House. Japan's finance minister has pulled out of this week's G20 meeting to focus on trying to pass next year's budget, while US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is staying away amid a spat between Trump's administration and South Africa. Annual consumer inflation rose for the second month in a row in December. It reached 3%, but remains at the bottom end of the South African Reserve Bank's target. The bank began cutting interest rates in September last year. But some analysts believe it may pause its cutting cycles soon due to a deterioration in the global economic backdrop and emerging domestic risks.
Apple is the latest company to really splash out on AI, but when will investors see an upside? This is Sectors Up Close, and we're talking AI. Apple says it plans to bring online a 250,000 square foot factory in Texas by 2026 to build artificial intelligence servers, and it will add about 20,000 research and development jobs. It's the latest in a series of multi-billion-dollar investments from major tech firms in AI, despite the market shock in January when China's DeepSeek revealed a similar product developed at a much lower cost. Will Rind is founder and CEO of Granite Shares. Will, as you pointed out in your notes, investors bought the dip after the DeepSeek sell-off. Why?
Well, I think that the AI trend still remains very much the most important investment trend this year, and obviously has done for the last couple of years. So we've seen investment in terms of CapEx from the hyperscalers. Those are largely the largest of the large tech companies, actually increase by $100 billion year on year. So investment into AI is accelerating, and it's accelerating across the ecosystem, and Apple is just one example of this acceleration in spend.
In the wake of the DeepSeek news, though, shouldn't investors be asking bigger questions about the wisdom of throwing this much money at the technology if it can be done much more cheaply and using fewer advanced chips?
Yeah, I think, look, the reality of the DeepSeek thing is we perhaps will never know exactly the ins and outs of how that was achieved and whether the claims that were made really were that it could do a lot more with a lot less. But that being said, certainly investors have bought the dip in AI. The CapEx continues to accelerate. We've got NVIDIA reporting earnings, which is the probably most important stock in the AI market, and we'll see from the earnings that come out and certainly the discussion around earnings about those trends, and those will really be the guidepost in terms of how investors are thinking about AI at the moment.
As you say, pressure is on NVIDIA to justify the valuation that made it the world's second most valuable company. Will it show that, do you think?
I think so. Like it has continuously done. I think that the expectations would be for another beat in terms of earnings, another raise. And I think the tea leaves in some respects already tell you this, because NVIDIA typically reports, or is one of the latest companies to report in the cycle. By that time, you've had the other hyperscalers, the Metas, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons have already reported. So they leave these little breadcrumbs for investors in terms of their spend and their commentary on AI. And from what we can tell so far, the demand for NVIDIA chips is just accelerating. The order books are full, have more demand than supply, and therefore this will be the key thing. No large tech company is trying to get out of spending. No one wants to lose their place in the line, so to speak, in terms of the new Blackwell chips. So I think we'll see another good earnings report from NVIDIA.
How then should you play this as an investor?
Well, look, I think that AI is still something that is akin to fourth industrial revolution. It's like the start of the internet, in the late 90s. And so people, I think, are already positioned well in terms of holding stocks that I think will benefit from AI. So clearly NVIDIA at the top of that list. But as you look down the AI ecosystem, clearly it's not just NVIDIA that's going to benefit from AI.
Do companies like Apple and Microsoft have to demonstrate a profitable use case to their shareholders pretty soon?
I think yes is the short answer, and that's certainly where you see pushback from investors, and the bears that are taking the other side of the AI argument will sort of point to that increasingly as a point, or the main point of consternation around the big tech companies. But with AI adoption accelerating, I think the possibility or the probability that these companies start to see meaningful return on investment increases. So the use of AI agents, for example, and other forms of uses across the ecosystem will benefit some of these companies, those particularly that can deploy the technologies in the most useful way. So yes, people are nervous about the amount of money that's been spent, looking for evidence that there's a sign of a return on investment. And for companies like Apple, for example, that is largely the bull case in the stock, is the use of Apple Intelligence or use of AI within the Apple ecosystem. And so I think it's something that investors are clearly, thinking about the forefront of making investment decisions. But as the ecosystem expands, I think that more use cases will come to meet.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were: St. Kitts and Nevis moves closer to establishing National Architects Registration Board. St. Kitts and Nevis continues to accelerate 25 by 25 food sovereignty agenda. Public consultations begin in St. Lucia on cannabis industrial bill. Concerns mount in Antigua and Barbuda about sexual harassment in the workplace. Internationally, Hamas says no Gaza ceasefire talks unless Israel releases prisoners. Thank you for listening.